Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. The US military said it has killed one person in a strike on a low-profile vessel allegedly suspected of carrying drugs in international waters in the eastern Pacific Ocean. Meanwhile, the US Southern Command confirmed the strike on social media website X. Southern Russian region's governor Vladimir Vladimirov has said that the Ukrainian overnight drone attack has sparked a fire at an industrial facility in Russia's southern Stavropol region. There were no injuries reported, while he did not specify which facility was on fire as well. US Navy said 2 people have been killed after Mexican Navy plane crashed in waters off of the US state of Texas while carrying out a medical transfer. The Mexican Navy said that 8 people were traveling aboard the aircraft. 4 people were rescued alive as rescue efforts are still ongoing. Sudan's Prime Minister has called on the UN Security Council to back a peace plan for the war-torn country that calls for a ceasefire and global monitoring of the conflict. Since April 2023, Sudan's army has battled the paramilitary rapid support forces. The war has killed many and displaced millions. Vietnam's Communist Party chief To Lam is seeking a new mandate as the country's top leader has earned a reputation as an ambitious risk-taker, whose brief initial tenure was defined by rapid sweeping reforms and a commanding leadership style, as senior officials of the Communist Party has ruled Vietnam unopposed for decades. Thailand's central bank chief, the finance ministry, and the Securities and Exchange Commission will hold a briefing on the baht today. This move follows a surge in the currency as the baht has gained 10% against the dollar so far this year to become Asia's best performing currency. Australia is moving towards its toughest gun laws after a deadly Sydney attack. New South Wales will vote on sweeping restrictions and a ban on terrorist symbols to boost public safety. China's reusable Long March 2012A rocket failed to recover its first stage during its maiden launch, marking Beijing's second unsuccessful attempt at a booster landing. The rocket's second stage did successfully reach its planned orbit, highlighting both progress and setbacks of reusable launch technology. Now for this hour, we start with US President Donald Trump has broken his silence on the release of the Epstein files, saying the publication of photos could destroy the reputations of people who innocently met the convicted sex offender. Speaking at his Mar-a-Lago residence, Trump has expressed sympathy for prominent Democrats, including ex-President Bill Clinton, who have come under renewed scrutiny. Trump has said that he did not like seeing photos of Clinton or others released and called the move a terrible thing. Trump has claimed many people were friendly with Epstein and warned that being seen in a photo at a party could unfairly ruin someone's career. He has said that highly respected bankers, lawyers, and academics could be damaged despite having no involvement in Epstein's crimes. The president also criticized the focus on Epstein, calling it a distraction from what he described as Republican success. Meanwhile, pressure is growing on the Justice Department to release all remaining Epstein files after Congress mandated full disclosure, and only one batch has been made public so far. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Peter Baum. He's an editor at Weekly Blitz, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mr. Peter, for joining us again. Good to see you. Thank you. Now looking at this, what are we to make of the latest comments made by President Donald Trump?
Yes, this story, the Epstein files, doesn't seem that it's going to go away, does it?
Yes.
And no one looks like they're going to come out well from it. Now, clearly, the Democrats are going to use Trump's association with Epstein for political capital. Their hope and expectation is that there will be some kind of compromising evidence that will damn Donald Trump to the point where he would be beyond recovery. And it seems that at the moment, had there been such evidence, I'm sure it would have come out by now. Excuse me. All we have is a huge number of photographs. The ones we've seen with Trump have been old ones where he's with Epstein and they seem to be in some kind of room. But there doesn't seem to be anything as yet that fully compromises Trump to Epstein. And I think I'm sure we would have seen that by now. And because of that, I think Trump will survive this. Now, whether any other photos come out compromising other high-profile figures, we don't know. I'm sure if there had have been, and they were enemies of Trump, the DOJ would not have redacted them and they would have made them public. So at the moment, other than a huge number of photographs, no one as yet seems fully compromised. The only person that has suffered has been the ex-Duke of York, Prince Andrew.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. A lot of people are involved in this. So if Trump was innocent, why do you think these Epstein files are taking so long for them to release? It's like in episodes instead of just in one go.
Okay, that's a very good question. Now, the amount of photographs must run into thousands, mustn't it? We've seen hundreds released already. So the Department of Justice has a role to play here, and that role, firstly, is to ensure that no high-profile government politician, certainly the president, is compromised unfairly. So they would be going through every photo in the finest of detail to absolutely ensure that those people who could easily be made the focus of media attention, even though they have done nothing wrong, are fairly treated. As much so for the so-called victims as well. Don't forget, it's not only the attendees who are compromised in this, it's the victims too. And to answer your question, why has there been a drip? I think it's purely to ensure that every photo is carefully analysed, and obviously there are people to protect, and I don't think we're going to get full transparency. What government ever does show full transparency? And Donald Trump will certainly be protected if there's anything in the slightest that could be seen as compromising. But at the moment, from what we've seen from previous releases, there's nothing yet to link him to doing anything criminal, let's say.
Thank you very much for laying it out there for us, Mr. Peter Baum, and joining us from London. Now we move on to our next news. Poland has deployed fighter jets and allied aircraft after Russian airstrikes hit western Ukraine near its border. The Polish armed forces say ground-based air defense and radar systems were also put on high alert. Officials described the measures as preventive, aimed at securing and protecting Polish airspace, especially in areas close to the threatened regions. The NATO member country is closely monitoring the situation as tensions arise along the border with Ukraine. Poland emphasizes that these steps are defensive, focused on safety rather than escalation. Now, for this discussion, we welcome retired Major General Gigi Dividi. He's a defense analyst, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General Gigi Dividi, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now,
thank you.
Thank you. Now, looking at this, how do you analyze, what do you think is moving Poland to be this, assertive or this preventive in their military measures. What do you think this reflects Poland's approach and precautions now?
Well, Suma, the point is Russia is continuing to strike the Ukrainian, especially the energy infrastructure, energy installations. And these strikes recently were very close to the Poland border. They were primarily on the western Ukraine. And earlier too, Russian Air Force has violated the airspace of Poland and also of the Baltic republics. So therefore, Poland Air Force was in the heightened alert and ensure that their airspace is not once again violated. So therefore, their fighter jets were up in the air and also their ground system were also activated, particularly air defense system, the surveillance system. And rightly so, these are preventive measures because in case these measures are not taken, then it will embolden the Russians to violate the airspace once again. Along with that, we need to also understand a couple of other developments that are taking place. Latest was the release of U.S. national security strategy, which categorically pinpoints that the European or the NATO strategy has not worked against Russia, and the European and NATO countries must escalate their defense budget and do more to protect themselves. Willy-nilly saying that, well, America expects Europe to raise or escalate its own defense and not totally rely upon America. So therefore, I think currently there is high level of tension among the NATO countries, and in fact they are also preparing for the worst, possibly if there is a conflict. And there were reports that almost 800,000 NATO troops will be mobilized in case the Russian threat actually escalates or further manifests. So the point I'm trying to make, Kasuma, is that the European countries, or especially NATO countries, are on high alert. They are preparing even for the worst, and these responses are a very clear message to the Russian Air Force and Russian Defense Forces that they will not accept any infringement or violation of their airspace or territorial integrity. Asuma.
Thank you for highlighting that. And Major General, so what do you think, what role it does Poland seek? You mentioned all the reasons why Poland is doing this, but how do you think Poland is looking forward in having this role? Does Poland seek to play a role within NATO as tensions continue to rise in Eastern Europe, and how might Poland's actions influence the other regions around Poland and Russia?
Well, Asuma, geographically, Poland is a frontier state, and historically, it has suffered during the World War aggression, both sides, and especially by the Russians. So, therefore, geographically and historically, Poland is very sensitive to the development that are taking place in Ukraine, and there have been statements by the Polish leaders that if Ukraine, either gives way or cedes territory, then it will be encouragement for the Russians to then next target Poland. So point I'm trying to make is that both historically and geographically, Poland is very vulnerable, very sensitive, and they will take highest precautions to ensure that once again they are not victim of history, and they are not also defaulted by geography. So I think Poland approach is rather proactive, and also it's a kind of a example, or I would say a kind of a pattern that other NATO countries must follow, because the issue is that President Putin is in no mood as yet to call off the war. President Putin and his generals think that they are winning, but they are not exactly. There is a kind of stalemate. But the aerial strikes are continuing, and it is taking a heavy toll of the infrastructure, especially of the energy and related installations. So at the end, I think Poland is taking all the precautions, ensuring that its defense is not compromised, and also possibly laying out a certain trend lines for the other European nations that only a strong defense will deter Russia. Otherwise, if Russians feel the European Union and especially NATO, they are not on the same page currently, there are differences and Russia may quite exploit those vulnerabilities. So I think this is why Poland is taking no chances and also giving very clear message to other NATO allies that only strong defense can ensure their security. Asuma.
Thank you very much. With that, I would like to thank Major General Gigi Dwivedi for joining us today and sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Now we move on to Asia. In the 2025 Myanmar general election, Kyaw Hitwe, also known as Marky, who is a 60-year-old former political prisoner, is running for the parliamentary seat formerly held by ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi. He is vying for votes in a military-managed poll starting on Sunday. Myanmar's military has snatched power in 2021 coup, toppling Suu Kyi's government. Declaring as fraudulent elections she won by a landslide, dissolving her party and plunging the country into a civil war. However, many international monitors have dismissed the move as a mere rebranding of military rule, and the junta has embarked on a crackdown, punishing criticism of the vote with up to a decade in prison. Now for this discussion, we welcome Dr. Asna Chadha. She's Associate Professor of International Relations at Ritsumeikan University, joins us live from Kyoto. Thank you very much, Dr. Chadha, for joining us again. Good to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Now, what more can you tell us about the situation in Myanmar? How do you analyze? Do you see this as, just ex-junta or military coup takeover? After the coup takeover, are they just trying to sugarcoat their government as a legitimate government?
Thank you for having me here to do this discussion. Well, I mean, it's very important to understand the backdrop, and you very well explained it. You summarized what was happening back in 2021. But we do know that when Aung San Suu Kyi, she had run for the seat, she had secured over 82% of the votes, which are substantial given that the military by default gets 25% of parliamentary seats. And, seeing that they could pretty much be out of power, seeing that there could be a possibility that the constitution could be amended in a way to reduce military's guaranteed quarter of the parliamentary seats, they ran what they did, what we are calling as a military coup. And the idea was to delegitimize the elections and state that there were election frauds, and I mean those were the kind of arguments that the military was making at that point. So the question then arises, then why do the elections now? If democracy is not working, why do it now? And the response to that is, they have earned, I mean, the military as an institution, they have realized that they now need to, on an urgent basis, transition from this military council-based leadership to a civilian-led government, even if it is just a facade. They need to do it, and not just for their domestic security, they need to do it to gain more trust among the people. They need to do it to bring about some sort of political stability, and internationally they need to do it so that their neighbors, their allies, could once again maintain diplomatic and business ties with them. They need to do it to also stabilize their economy. Now, given that, given the fact that this clearly looks like a very well managed sort of an election, this is not one of those elections that were happening back in 2020. The international community is calling it sham elections, so on and so forth. The context of it is pretty clear to everyone what is happening. The third question then is, if they're not going to reinstate Aung San Suu Kyi, who was clearly, voted into power with 82% seats, who will take that seat or who will take that power? And looks like this new, this new candidate from People's Party, Mr. George Otway, his nickname Marky, he seems to be somebody who used to be earlier a pro-democracy activist alongside Aung San Suu Kyi back in 1988, and then he was also imprisoned earlier for doing this, for opposing the military, and now he's come out saying that he does not want to ideally betray Aung San Suu Kyi, but at the same time, he's being more pragmatic here, stating that he wants to strike a compromise. Because he wants to see his country return to stability. Though those claims at this point seem to be very, very weak, because we know the way military is conducting these elections, which are also very phased and very controlled, it is very unlikely that the military would be willing to give up power to a civilian government at any rate, anyway. But the fact that they want to hold elections with their favorite candidates or with a candidate that can be managed definitely brings into question the intention behind holding this sort of an election, that too in December 2025.
Yes, and building on this, you've already mentioned a little bit and touched down on this, but former political prisoner who's running for the parliamentary seat. So what does this Mr. Markey's candidacy signal about political participations under current military rule?
Absolutely. I mean, there are going to be, very wide implications for this. So one is very clear, the fact that military, when back in 2008, the Myanmar military had drafted the 2008 constitution, they had automatically given themselves 25% of the seats. Now, given that Mr. Markey is not a very popular candidate and definitely not as popular, though he's trying to run for Suu Kyi's seat, we don't know how this is going to turn out and what is the condition under which this very carefully managed election is taking place. But it's very unlikely that he would win the kind of popularity that Suu Kyi had earlier won. So, it's clear that military wants to secure its 25% veto that it maintains. It wants to make sure that military retains 100% control over constitutional changes so that they are never ousted from power. There is a second, aspect to this, wherein the military or the junta, it has lost control of its own borders and trade routes in the past few years that we've seen since 2021, largely to ethnic groups or largely to these militants who've been fighting inside for their peace, or people who have been displaced and they're fighting for their economic heartland, so on and so forth. And the military currently thinks that it probably having a civilian face to the leadership would allow them to put back these resource lifelines back into action and then kind of regain those trade border routes and those ethnic sort of peace that could be struck amongst groups, given that now there's a civilian who's in power. And third aspect of this, which is still kind of a bit murky because there isn't much that's coming out in terms of details, is who exactly would be elected as the president? I mean, are we still looking at Min Aung Hlaing as the president that allows him to have a very legal status, that allows him to evade any of those, accusations of human rights abuses, specifically with regard to their Rohingya population? Because that is the whole point, right? They want to continue to be in power. And then also, will this person, irrespective of what percentage of votes he gains, will probably be, made the face of this partly civilian-led government? Will this person be assuring enough to bring in the likes of China, bring in the likes of India to come back and invest in their country, given that there is a political instability, there is an economic instability? Those things need to be carefully examined. But as of now, what is clear is that the military seems to be empowering minor parties like People's Party, rather than somebody like Suu Kyi, who was already very, very popular, to run this election. And looks like military hopes to create a very managed opposition. It wants to stay in power itself, but it wants to create a very managed opposition, do it through very managed elections, so that they can show, at least as a facade, that there is some teeth to this pro-democracy movement.
Yes, and lastly, Dr. Chadha, why do you think how this, we're seeing this tactic, or I may say strategy, used by many countries in recent, this year especially around the world, to become a legitimate government, using coups, using these tactics that we are seeing even between in Myanmar. What is this tactic used, and now why do you think we are seeing this, increasing around the world?
I mean, absolutely, it's a very, it's a shame. It's very, very unfortunate that we are seeing a rise in democratic backsliding. I mean, it's happening right in our neighborhood. We look towards Bangladesh, we see similar things happening with with an interim government not willing to lose power again and delaying elections. Or we see this in Myanmar. We see it across the globe in a lot of countries that are trying to find their way back into being a democracy, at some point that they had achieved it. I mean, there are myriad of factors, that are causing it. One is very clear, that there is some amount of domestic, how do I call it, domestic grievance that has not been dealt with for a very long time. I mean, in case of Myanmar too, there were domestic grievances specifically with regard to the ethnic conflicts and, the Rohingya population that was ousted or, exiled from the lands of Myanmar. So we are seeing this combination of bad politics, crippling institutions, specifically crippling democratic institutions, freedom taken away from media to report and make their voices heard outside. And then we see that a lot of times the leaders that are instated, whether they come from the military, like in the case of Myanmar, or whether they are instated and selected and then put into power, like in the case of Bangladesh, these leaders don't seem to want to give up power, or they are failing to maintain, or to manage the crisis at home. They don't come with a training, either political or economic, to manage the multiple crises that are happening. And then, of course, we cannot overlook the fact that there are external pressures, right? So countries like Myanmar and Bangladesh do seem to be under a lot of pressure from a larger geopolitical competition that is happening across the globe. And all of these factors together end up basically, in some way harming or challenging the democracy that these nations have had, maintained or tried to maintain for a decade or more. So I mean, this is sad, but the only hope probably for these nations would be if, even if it is step by step, if they could build slowly and gradually, if they could strengthen their institutions, if public trust could be built, and if, the leadership that comes into power does take responsibility and can be held accountable using those institutions, there is still hope for these nations to come back to their democratic standing.
Yes, I hope so too. Very well said. You always impress me, Dr. Chadda. Thank you for sharing that with us. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we move the focus to Vietnam. Vietnam's Communist Party chief To Lam has said that senior officials of Vietnam's ruling Communist Party has concluded a two-day plenum in Hanoi and finalizing decisions on candidates for the country's next top leadership. Lam has been seen as the leading contender to keep the country's most powerful post, but in line with standard practices in the secretive country, where the announcements are expected only at the five-yearly party, which Congress has scheduled for January 19 to 25 next year. Lam has said that delegates have voted with a high level of support for nominees to key positions. Lam has added that the officials have agreed to continue public administration reforms and accelerate infrastructure expansion policies that he has championed during his initial brief term as the party chief. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Dr. Asta Chadda. She's an associate professor in Ritsumeikan University, joins us live from Kyoto. Thank you very much, Dr. Chadda, for staying with us. Now looking at this, how might this To Lam's likely continuation as party chief, how do you think this will influence Vietnam's domestic reform and also infrastructure priorities?
Absolutely. I mean, we saw that, him being formerly, in a position of power as the Minister of Public Security, he's already been very popular leading this anti-corruption drive, under which he was able to purge several high-level leaders and rivals, I would say, which left him with little opposition. So the fact that he, if he were to be again put back in his position of power, it's very likely that he will have to deal with little opposition. That's one. Two, he himself, has branded himself as this new innovator or a reformer in terms of institutions, specifically when it comes to Vietnamese bureaucracy. Which is crucial, according to him, to solve these economic issues and economic challenges or bottlenecks that Vietnam is facing. So the hope is that under his leadership, Vietnam would then be able to, strive harder and probably make a good candidate for being the next economic rising economy, or the hub, as Vietnam is aiming towards being. And we saw that when a lot of capital was moving out of China, we saw that countries like Vietnam and Thailand were becoming the emerging hubs for further international investment. And it's hoped that under his leadership, Vietnam could once again see that revival of economy, or further economic growth. And the third aspect of this is that, given that his own political background of being somebody who's very strong-headed in terms of maintaining law and order, in terms of navigating global economic and political or geopolitical uncertainty, it's hoped that Vietnam could finally move away from its very traditional balance of power sort of mode, wherein you have several leaders within one political party who are contesting for power, to a more centralized single leader system, which is kind of mimicking the system in China currently, wherein there is this one leadership that is extremely strong versus the other factions. So that's another thing that could happen under his leadership. And then lastly, Vietnam seems to be on a foreign policy front. Looks like things are going to remain in that sense much of a continuity for Vietnam, because it will continue to balance its relations with US and China. I don't think under his leadership they're going to bandwagon with either of the two powers. But there could be a more proactive stance in Vietnam, specifically when it comes to aligning with China and the China-led supply chains, given that Vietnam no longer is interested in being part of these trade wars.
Yes, we will be eyeing that. Thank you for covering it all for us, Dr. Chadaf, and joining us on NewsX World. Now we move on to our next news. Nestle's CEO Philip Navratil has said that Nestle views its stake in L'Oreal as a financial investment, and while it is regularly reviewed, there is nothing new to report on the matter. Navratil, who took the helm in September after a period of unusual turmoil in the company, says that Nestle intended to reach its goal of 4% organic growth as fast as possible. He has also added that he's very confident about the growth prospects with pet food and saw incredible opportunities on coffee. Meanwhile, according to Navratil, Nestle is sticking to plans to review its water business, for which it is looking for a strategic partner in its mainstream vitamins and nutritional supplements division. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.